Aloha, and welcome back to Wanderous. I am your host, Andrew Crusoe, and this is my third take starting this episode. I am still a little bit sick. I'm getting over what I think is COVID, but I don't know if it is. This is a show about personal growth disguised as a show about travel. Now, does that mean I won't tell you life-saving and budget-saving tips? I'm absolutely going to tell you those things as well. We're doing the whole thing. And today we're going to resume after a bit of a detour, after a very difficult couple months since I've done this show sort of in a normal way. We're going to get back into it. We had a big loss in my family personally. If those of you who have been reading my Patreon will know a little bit more about that, but I don't want to dwell on that now. I want to dwell on the future. I want to dwell on what I can create, and I want to dwell on gratitude. You know, I've been reflecting on the last 2.5 years and the 15 countries I've been able to visit, to spend time in, and on the whole feel very welcomed in. And it strikes me how rare that kind of experience is. When you look at the average person on the planet, most people probably don't have that opportunity, or they don't feel like they have that opportunity, or they're born in a country with a relatively weak currency, which makes that much more difficult to go thousands of kilometers, thousands of miles. But I'm here to tell you that if that's something in your heart, if it's something that you're feeling an invitation from life, if you're feeling like, oh, man, I've been thinking about going to this place for a year or 5 years or a decade or longer, that desire is in you because it's possible. I think most of the time we find that to be true, that life puts a desire in our hearts. Esther Hicks talks about this. If you're interested in some vaguely woo-woo stuff, Esther Hicks channels an entity called Abraham. It's a little out there, but wow, the stuff that comes through this spirit of Abraham is really wild. And she talks about how if you have a desire, that means that if you're in alignment with that desire, that means that it's possible. That means that it might be part of your soul's path if it keeps coming up again and again and again. And global travel kept coming up for me, and I kept resisting it for a long time. So I want to make this show sort of a permission slip for you and maybe a spark of inspiration for you to start thinking about different ways you can go outside of your comfort zone, thinking about different ways you can question maybe some limiting beliefs you've had. You're like, oh, I can't afford it, or I'm not going to have the time, or it's dangerous, or. Because what happens when you succumb to these resistance feelings, what happens is you get to the end of your life and you go, if only I had done that. I regret not taking that risk, or I regret not trying. And that's kind of how I felt before I went to Hawaii and ended up living on the islands for 5 years total in 2 different stints, 2 different time periods. And in other ways before I went to Europe. So in the spirit of going outside our comfort zone, today we're going to return to the beautiful port city of Marseille, France, on the Côte d'Azur, which basically means the Blue Coast. Now, the Blue Coast is a very special part of the world. It's incredibly beautiful. If you've been listening to Wanderous for a while, you'll probably recall some other adventures that I had in Marseille and a bit north of Marseille when I went to the experimental thermonuclear reactor project, ITER, I-T-E-R. They don't like me to use the word thermonuclear anymore, though, so I should probably stop saying thermonuclear. But it is thermonuclear in the best possible way. It's not... Anyway, that's a good episode if you haven't heard that. That project will lead to a lot of energy independence and a lot of clean energy. But I was in Marseille for a month total. I still had 2 weeks to go by the time I went to its most famous, and I do mean most famous, location. It's a total symbol of the city called Notre-Dame De la Garde, which is a gorgeous basilica on a hill overlooking the city. And I had wanted to go up there for a couple weeks, ever since I arrived in Marseille. And the time finally came around. I finished editing the ETAL interview, and I had some time. And I took the bus, and I'm surprised, as I was reviewing the photos for this episode, I was surprised I didn't have any photos of the sort of chaotic experience it was actually getting there, because it turns out a lot of people like to go there. And there are limited buses that go up to the top of the hill. The good news is Google Maps does have the bus schedule and the drop-off points. So that's how I was able to know what bus to take. It was relatively cheap. It was like €2. Wasn't too bad. And it took me from near Viewport, the old port, up this hill, but I had trouble finding the actual stop. This was a very unusual situation. And if I recall correctly, I actually missed it, and I had to run. I think I ran a few blocks to the next stop. And when I got there, the bus was packed. I barely fit in this bus. So we're all just inside of this bus. It's rocking back and forth. Going up this, probably the steepest, if I'm recalling, I would say it was the steepest road I can remember in Marseille. It was a nice, clear day. I was very lucky because I would get a remarkable view of the city after going inside of the basilica. Now, I can't really do this basilica justice in words. It's gorgeous. People who support the show will get photos that I took, raw photos actually, in their bonuses in about a week and a half or so. By the way, if you don't know, you can support this show at $10 per month. You can cancel anytime on Patreon. And when you support, not only do you get behind the scenes photos from almost every episode, I'd say every episode, you also get very exclusive episodes that I don't post publicly. So I will sometimes share very embarrassing and hilarious, let's just say, social interactions, and also very silly dates that I go on, or went on, I should say, when I was in Europe. And I will turn those into episodes. You also get over 20 hours of audiobook enjoyment in the form of, actually, I think you get like 28 hours now, because you not only do you get 10,000 Hours in Paradise, totally professionally produced, narrated by me. They're on Audible. It would cost you like $60 if you bought those on Audible. You get access to all of that, all streaming. You can stream that to your car, stream it through the Patreon app, and that's included at $10 a month. It's a lot cheaper than getting them on Audible. And more of the money goes to me as well. I probably, more of the money. Audible doesn't give me a very good cut. I probably shouldn't admit that publicly. Not only do you get that, you also get 8 hours of the Truth Beyond the Sky, my tropical sci-fi audiobook. I did a special commentary edition that finished a little while back, where you get insights on my first tropical sci-fi novel that I haven't shared anywhere else. So there's a lot of content. There's a lot of content that I provide for people who, support my work, and I'm extremely grateful for the people that are already doing that. You know who you are. But even if you're not, if you can't afford to support the show right now, that's totally fine. I just love hearing from you primarily. I love reading the comments, and you can join the Patreon for free, and you can upgrade later. On Patreon, patreon.com/Truth Hello Crusoe, that's the word hello, and then Crusoe, like Robinson Crusoe. Yes, I am a fictional character, apparently. Occasionally people ask me if I'm related to Robinson Crusoe, and I don't really know what to say, because that means that person doesn't realize that Robinson Crusoe is a fictional character created by Daniel Defoe in his novel. And I have to be careful how I approach that, because, if I approach it in a harsh tone, I could sound like a know-it-all, or just, you know what I mean? Like, I have to gracefully go like, I feel like I'm kind of like a novel character sometimes. And I try to maybe I'm thinking about it too much, but I try to bypass, I try to avoid them feeling like they're being made a fool of. It's like in the show The IT Crowd, when they asked Mr. Renham his favorite fictional character, and he said the Elephant Man. How do you tell people, this is a question for another show. How do you tell people, no, that's not a real person, in a way that they will be able to receive gracefully? Now, of course, it depends on the person's personality. It depends on their mood at the time. I digress. In short, the interior of now that I've finished my own ad for myself, for my Patreon, which is super fun. I love getting comments as well, and I reply to comments quickly. The interior of the basilica is gorgeous. It's gilded, it's gold-plated, all these things. And they actually have layers of different limestone and I believe it's red granite. It's the most stripy, if that's a word, the most stripy basilica I had ever seen. I think it must be because of the style of the shirts. Maybe I'm wrong. When I was in Brittany a few weeks before this visit, I was stunned by how much the French liked horizontal stripes. I don't know how else to say it. A lot of people were wearing horizontal stripes. Not something I would wear, but they were pulling it off. They were really pulling it off. So you enter this basilica, and it is free, by the way. They accept donations. They announce that proudly in 5 languages via a large sign. And you pass a sculpture of Christ on the cross with the everything that entails, and you get inside, and it's just this massive vaulted ceiling. The whole. If you've ever been in a cathedral, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, this would be a pretty good first time at a cathedral. One of the special things about this cathedral, however, are what is placed on the walls. Lining the walls are dozens, maybe hundreds of paintings of ships, paintings and drawings of ships and sea vessels. And I did some research about this because I didn't know at the time, and unfortunately almost everything in Notre-Dame De la Garde is written in French. Besides the part where they ask you for money, everything's written in French. So I didn't really understand why are there all of these really, really cool, like very old, small, they're like 20 centimeters across, 10 centimeters across, paintings of ships. And there are life preservers. The whole place is very maritime themed and really lovely. Like, as with many of these cathedrals, there's such a lovely energy collected inside of the building. And in my research, I learned that these are votive offerings. So these are sometimes symbols of gratitude, a donation to the cathedral itself, the basilica itself. And sometimes they are requests for divine intervention. So Marseille, historic port city, sailors and their families would actually come, in my research I learned this, they would come and pray to Virgin Mary in the basilica for a safe voyage. In some cases, these people were sailing all the way down to Algeria, going across the Mediterranean itself, and praying for protection from pirates, which was a thing in different periods of history. So many sailors would leave these paintings or carvings of ships as offerings, as votive offerings to the basilica itself. And of course, they would keep these and they would display them. Like, wow, what these incredible donations people are making. It was a very close-knit maritime community for a long time before the modern age. It was the maritime, the port of trade was where it was happening. There were people coming from all over the place. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it wasn't really clearly explained when I was there, so I had to look that up today. And that's one of the cool things about a basilica in general, is it's usually a reflection of the identity of the city itself. You get a view of the history through the lens of religion, in this case Catholicism, and it's always a treat. It was such a different feeling from the Sacré-Cœur, the Sacred Heart, that I would go to a couple weeks later in Paris. And one of the other things I loved about Notre-Dame De la Garde was the view. So they have this, and I really recommend you find this. You kind of go behind. You'll see it. There's a sort of semicircular viewing area with a painting. It's sort of painted onto this stone, and it describes everything you're seeing in front of you. It's painted on the stone and labeled in this sort of panorama. And there's also little binoculars. You can put €1 in to look through the binoculars. So I had some fun looking and trying to identify all of these little spots. And this photo will also be on Patreon as a bonus for the people who donate every week. And there's a lot to see. Not only can you see Viewport, which means the old port, and you can see the museum, which is one of the places I would visit. I believe it was the following week. That's coming up pretty quickly either way. This was also, and this is a bit of shameless promotion, but this is one of the first times that I took a photo of my book, 10,000 Hours in Paradise. I had ordered a tiny version. I have a tiny version of the book, which is the first volume of my true Hawaii adventure story. So I wanted to do a promotion experiment. And I think this is kind of, I don't know, maybe it's really dorky, but I have a funny photo holding my book in front of the really, really lovely view of the panorama of the city. But the adventures of that day did not end there. I had been invited by a new friend I had met through couch surfing to a little jazz jam type of thing downtown at a place called C4. I don't know if anybody's heard of C4 in Marseille. It's it's kind of a dive bar, but I had to get down there in time. So I thoroughly enjoying walking around the grounds and just being on this hill that's above the rest of the city. And I find the bus stop, and everybody's waiting, and people they're from 3 or 4 different countries, and they've been waiting for a while, and we were like, oh, we don't even know if the bus is coming, and I think even one bus came, and they said, oh, we're out of service, but one is definitely coming. And this is something that will happen when you travel. You will be waiting for a bus and wondering if you might not ever see the bus or ever see any bus again for the rest of your life, because buses are an uncertainty principle in life. Some countries are much more reliable than others, but it was getting pretty late at that point. It was getting into 6:30, which for that part of town, the buses start to, I think they stop at around 7 for some parts of Marseille. So I didn't know if this bus was going to come, and I made some nice small talk. Wow, I know it's surprising, me making small talk with people I was sitting with, and people were just very kind, very lovely. And thank goodness this bus arrived. I actually think I had my Marseille, I had my Metro Pass, which I mentioned in previous episodes. So you get a whole week for about $20, which if you use it, a couple times a day, pays for itself, especially if you go on the Metro. And thank goodness, made my way back down the hill and took another bus. You know, it's really great to have an unlimited pass because you can, if you take the wrong bus, I really recommend this. This is my other travel tip. If there is an unlimited pass, do a little bit of math. If that pass costs less than riding the thing twice a day for whatever amount of time you're going to be there, it's worth it. The amount of stress it's going to relieve from you fumbling around for cash. Still, most countries, they want cash. If you can avoid that, if you can get an unlimited, it's going to be a much more, in my experience, much more flowing, enjoyable experience for you. And if you screw up, you just go, oh, well, I'm going to walk over here and just flash my pass again. And you can accidentally explore a lot of a city that way. If you're looking for a silver lining, that's your silver lining. If you take the wrong bus, it's like following someone who knows where they're going. Not that I recommend that, but Dirk Gently used to do it. And if you follow somebody who knows where you're going, you might not go where you intended, but you'll often arrive somewhere you needed to be. And I made it. I made it to this performance by the Cats at C4. I'm going to play a little bit of audio from. I have a live photo from this. So, this is incredible. I should put this in the behind the scenes photos because I'm trying to grok what's happening here. There is a skeleton, plastic skeleton that's bright red behind a bassist who is behind a drum kit. So the bassist is apparently also playing the drums. I don't remember that. This was a little while ago, but it was fun. They jammed out, bassist and guitarist, just in this little dive bar, just having a blast, and it was nice to be around some live music. And my friend kind of showed me around. We're wandering around outside as well because sometimes it gets a bit loud in these things. And she showed me around. I think it's called La Plaine. There's a flat area in Marseille. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll link to it in Google Maps, and it's sort of a common space where there's a lot of restaurants, but there's these flat areas. I really wish I'd taken more photos of this place. And this was, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, the first time I tried a drink called pastis, which is a type of French liqueur, a pastis. And it began this whole quest for me to figure out when the heck do I pronounce the S at the end of a word, because usually you don't. But for pastis, and I eventually learned this because it's such an old word, they use the old pronunciation. Now, there is a town I would go to a few days after called Cassis. And Cassis is spelled with an S at the end, but you do not pronounce the S at the end of Cassis because French is a complicated language. Pronunciation rules, I would say, are at least as complicated as English, but at least French, in my opinion, it sounds more beautiful. So I had a pretty chill, I wouldn't say night on the town, but a nice, I'm very much a lightweight when it comes to alcohol. Don't use that against me. I actually haven't had alcohol now in over a year. I've never had a problem with alcohol, but it's a kind of a social experiment that I'm doing. So when you do go to Marseille, please work your way around downtown. There's so many different bubbles. There's a moment coming up where I tour this elevated area as well. I think that's coming up. Where's the elevated area? Yeah, it's such a gorgeous collection of neighborhoods that I think it'd be easy to go to Marseille for a couple of days and go, oh, it's got these cool things, whatever. But if you really take a moment to walk around, there are unexpected surprises that will unfold for you. Even like lovely little plant-based cafes. There is even and I may have mentioned this in a previous episode, but if I haven't, I'll get to it. There is a vegan patisserie, like a bakery, where if this is good for anybody listening who's sensitive to milk, anybody who's sensitive to dairy like me, they make the absolute, this was like my best food experience in France because I'm lactose intolerant. And it's called La Faune, Faon. And their food is incredible. And there are no animal products at all. So I could eat it and my body wouldn't freak out. But I digress. That was the end of the day. I ended my day in this lovely little spot, this common area that was very flat, where people would just sit and hang out and people watch. And I felt so much gratitude for a very full day. It was a very full day, and there were some lovely surprises waiting for me the following day when I would visit one of the most interesting monuments in Marseille, and then right after that, going to a place called Le Friche, which is easily the most off-the-wall, creative spot that I saw in France at all. Oh man, I might have to give away one of these photos of Le Friche for free, just so everybody can see how awesome this was. And I'm going to talk about all of that next time. Thanks again for listening to Wanderous. If you have any questions about Notre-Dame De la Garde, or if you feel like there's something that I should have touched upon, please feel free to leave a comment on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/HelloCrusoe, Crusoe. And if you're not already, please follow this show on Spotify. It would mean a lot to me. I put a lot of work into the show. And Spotify is a really good way to make sure you don't miss any episodes. I'm going to get back into doing this much more regularly and, kind of getting out of a grieving process here. And I really appreciate every single comment that I get. It's really an honor to make art for you, to share these stories with the world. And, I'll see you next time. Aloha.